Hey guys, this is just a quick video showing my completed Mayhem 3 endgame build for Zane. In my last video I covered the Grave Ward bossing build, but this is going to be my more general gameplay and mobbing build, including basically just running through the story on Mayhem 3. You can farm most bosses, actually including Grave Ward, you can still farm with this build, and also very importantly you can do the Slaughter Shaft and the Circle of Slaughters, the Iridian Proving Grounds. You can basically do anything with this build, and this is what I think I've been really loving about Zane, because I suppose it's not so much the case with a lot of the OP builds, but with some of the OP builds on the other characters, like Flak, let's say, you can absolutely destroy some bosses with the crit fadeaway build, for example. But you know, when it comes to general mobbing and stuff, you just will not be able to survive and output that same damage across wide groups of targets. So first of all, I'm going to go over my skill tree, and then I'll show you the items that I'm using to maximize those skills. Um, just one quick thing, because I will demonstrate some gameplay afterwards. I do use my guardian ranks. As you can see, I've maxed out the survivor tree and the hunter tree. I spec'd into them all for now, just because, well, I mean, I just decided to. You know, there's some quite cool effects here, especially the treasure hunter one. Increases luck and stuff. That's nice when farming. So I just wanted to get skills like that. I know it does slightly skew the gameplay, but yeah, there they are. It's just helpful, and one day, eventually, hopefully, Gearbox will let us turn them off. But anyway, build first, and as you can see, this is a blue and green tree build. You would have seen in the bottom right corner anyway, at the start of the video, that those are the action skills that I have. So we have the Sentinel as our primary action skill, and without going into too much really about why I chose blue and green tree, basically, believe me, I've tested them, and you can make some really nice builds with the orange tree, especially now that they've buffed the digiclone, but of course they have also buffed the blue tree, and the blue and the green trees together just synergize well. And since I've been having so much success, you know, being able to solo the Slaughter Shaft on Mayhem 3, farm bosses, all this stuff with basically this build, this is the build that I'm going to be showing you today. So to start off with, in my blue tree, you guys may have noticed that I do not have any skills in violent speed, and that's because I just don't think it's really worth it for this build, because violent speed really isn't that good of a skill, and you'd think it synergizes really well with violent momentum, but it basically just doesn't, because um, Zane gains movement speed as a kill skill, and the thing with movement speed is, yeah, it synergizes with violent momentum to give you extra gun damage, but the scaling of the gun damage, it's linear scaling. It doesn't scale up very high to give you a lot of damage, and of course the very essence of having high movement speed has diminishing returns, because the faster you move, the less accurate you are. So yeah, I could have done a slide speed build or a splatter gun build with a shotgun or something, and just focused on getting these skills really buffed up and then sliding around everywhere. But really, unless you're fighting an absolutely massive enemy, you won't be able to hit the broadside of a barn with a movement speed based build. So I did neglect to take violent speed. Violent momentum, of course, it's just bonus 20% gun damage really, and of course if you're going any faster, it's slightly more, but at the end of the day, we do need to just progress the tree, and violent momentum is slightly better than violent speed. I put 1 point in Cold Bore. We're not particularly bothered about the swap speed or the damage. To be honest, you don't need to swap weapons that frequently. I've done an entire Slaughter Shaft run, for example, without swapping my weapon once, just using the Maggie, as you'll see. But anyway, the reason basically to putting 1 point in this is because just the bonus cryo damage, it's not about the damage itself, but just the cryo stats effect. We are doing a cryo focus build on the other tree, and having a cryo shot the first time you fire your weapon is always nice. Cool Hand, just basically a good way to get down the tree, because we're being pretty efficient with our skill point allocations here, and Cool Hand is very useful reloading, because, well, I mean, it's pretty obvious why reload is useful. A lot of the weapons that we use have relatively small mag sizes that you can't fire for too long, so having bonus movement reload speed is always nice. And Salvation, Normally lifesteal skills are pretty weak, but Salvation is actually an incredibly strong skill. 12% lifesteal as a kill skill. 12% is very good, especially at Mayhem 3, where we're dealing masses of damage to kill our enemies. So Salvation actually provides some really good survivability, which is vital when you're playing against Mayhem 3 and are facing very tough competition. Death follows close, just pretty much a staple skill to this build. You'd be silly not to pick it up. As you can see, getting bonus effects from kill skills. So every single one of these things, Cool Hand, Salvation, they're all getting 25% more bonus effects and 7-second duration, and all that for only 1 skill point. So it's pretty obvious why we picked that up. Violent Violence, who doesn't love a bit of extra fire rate? In fact, it's not too essential with some of the guns, some of the Jacobs guns on this build, but with some of the SMGs and the shotguns and stuff that we're using, having 30% extra fire rate for 15 seconds is very useful. In fact, you can see we do have +1 point in it from my class mod, but I'll get onto that in a minute. I don't have any points in playing dirty, just because kind of like with Two Fang for 0 in Borderlands 2, I mean, I know an additional projectile is nice, but it's just not as good as fire rate overall for the DPS, especially since it relies on probability. And also, playing dirty only applies to 5 shots. The violent violence bonus will apply to every single shot that you fire for the next 15 seconds, which I'll tell you is going to be a lot more than 5. And good misfortune. This is basically one of the things that keeps the build really tight and keeps it very effective, because we have our action skills up almost entirely all the time, because we're getting kills and we're getting up to 30% max duration returned on our action skills. When we do so, that's with +3 points from the class mod. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure it would just be +15%. So yeah, you might have to settle for just 15% depending on what class mod roll you get, but the higher the better really is ideal. If you could find a +5 good misfortune one, then that would be the best. This skill is really important for keeping this build going. And seeing red, I suppose you could argue it's not that important for mobbing, because you're going to get one first skill anyway, but it is just very useful if you're in a tough spot, you're against a very tough enemy, for example a boss, and your kill skills have gone off, which means a lot of your damage and survivability has gone down. You know, you're trying to kill a really tanky enemy, and you can't really kill them easily without your kill skills, and as a result you're also dying, so it just allows you to re-up on your kill skills simply by activating your action skill, which we have in slot 1. And for the augments, Winter's Drone, this is a cryo build, so having that extra cryo damage is incredibly nice, because it doesn't really matter that the drone does no damage, as we're more using the drone for utility in this build. They have buffed the damage somewhat, and they've been trying to balance the drone and the Iron Bear and Zane's Digiclone more effectively in the late game, but really we're using the drone for utility. So we take the cryo and we take the radiation to weaken them, and as you can see, it also gives us some bonus stats like movement speed, damage, and fire rate, cooldown, blah blah blah. At the end of the day, it's just more effective than having these rockets. The rockets don't really do any damage late game, and the shield skill would be nice, but we've got other skills which can keep our shield topped up, and this overall will just increase our DPS, and with increased DPS comes increased survivability due to the nature of our build. So that's the blue tree. For the green tree, obviously we are taking the barrier. In theory we could spec into the green tree and just to still take our Digiclone, but no, we are using the barrier here. So action, skill, cooldown rate, adrenaline, very important skill. As I said, a lot of this build focuses around keeping your action skill up as much as possible. So while it's active, you're making it last a long time with skills like Good Misfortune, and when it's not, it's coming on off cooldown a lot quicker because of skills like Adrenaline. So of course that's what we take first. And to get basically just maximize the amount of points we can put in the green tree, we do take 2 points in Ready for Action. Just because of the way, if I would spec from beginning to show you, we need those extra points to get down as far as here, basically, even though we're not actually maxing this thing out. But it is a very good skill to have, because who doesn't want a bit of extra recharge rate and recharge delay? But it is not essential. We don't need 5 out of 5, because we can get this from other skills, which we'll see later. So Stiff Upper Lip is very important in the late game. Skills like this are pretty useless in normal mode, because normal mode, or let's say non-Mayhem mode, Mayhem 0, you're just not going to be receiving enough damage from your enemies really to to really need to worry about damage resistance. But at Mayhem 3, this is very important, and there are a lot of skills in the green tree combined with the barrier that help you survive a lot more effectively because of their damage resistance. Now you'll see we take 3 out of 5 in both the left and right skills. So Brain Freeze is a massive, massive part of this build. So combined with Cold War and our Cryo Sentinel, Brain Freeze, every time you hit a critical hit, there's a 12% chance that they'll be slowed, and that stacks until the target is frozen. So I'm sure you're already thinking, well, we could just use a gun with lots of pellets, and yes, that does stack up like that. So if you have a gun with 5 pellets, we have 5 chances to slow at 12%, and obviously we're spamming this gun, so we pretty quickly and effectively freeze almost all the enemies that we encounter. So they're freezable, even with only 3 points in the tree. 12%, to be honest, you could settle with only 2 and perhaps go for 8%. But 12% I found was the middle ground for me in allowing for quick freezing, but not over-investing when there are other skills that are important that we can get with one skill down here, making our individual skill points very important. And rise to the occasion. Once again, like I touched on with this skill here, the health regeneration would not be that vital on normal mode or less survival modes, but really, even though 3% doesn't seem like much, you take everything you can get at Mayhem 3, and it has definitely saved me on multiple occasions having this skill active. Just having some constant health regeneration is always nice. Confident Competence, we like a bit of gun damage and a bit of accuracy. And of course, this does depend on the amount of shields that we have, so it helps that it synergizes with skills like Ready for Action and other skills we'll cover down the tree. So yeah, it's useful for killing bosses as well, for example, because at the start of the boss phase we just get some more gun damage and accuracy, and our shield isn't really taking damage during that time. So it's nice if we're soloing, perhaps not big bosses like Graveward, but just the the story bosses that you'll encounter, like let's say the Warden. Moving down the tree, we have really expensive jackets, so status effects on Mayhem 3 and just in general in all the Borderlands games are an absolute pain. You could have just finished killing an entire wave of enemies, you've killed all the enemies, but you're on fire and then you die to the fire. Well, with this skill, just one skill point, those effects are going to last half as long, which is awesome. And Best Served Cold, kill skill, whenever we kill an enemy, it's going to create a little cryo nova. As you can see, the damage 156 is absolutely pitiful at level 50, but just the fact that we have a cryo nova helps because this is a cryo-focused build, and the cryo effect, the status effect, is what we're looking to help amplify, not the actual damage itself, so we can put 1 point in there. Futility Belt, this is a really nice skill actually, and I think this is a really well designed and balanced skill. So as you can see, we get resistance to non-elemental damage, but then after killing an enemy, all elemental damage we take is converted to non-elemental damage. So effectively we just get resistance to all damage all the time, since because of the blue tree, we're pretty much always going to have our kill skills up. So it's just another 15% damage reduction for 15 seconds, and as I've already been explaining, in fact I've touched on it quite a lot, we do really need survivability in Mayhem 3. That is pretty vital, especially when you're doing, for example, the Slaughter Shaft. This skill here, Refreshment, we only put 1 point into it, it is out of 3, but once again, when we're damaging a frozen enemy, we're getting 8% lifesteal, combined with our health regeneration from Rise to the Occasion, and our lifesteal from Salvation. This just basically is another skill for helping us keep topped up on health and maintain our survivability. And once again, it's high value for money because at the late game we're dealing a lot of damage, so 8% of lifesteal is enough to keep us sustained. We don't need to invest the full skill points to get more lifesteal because we're actually doing so much damage relative to our health that the 8% is a substantial amount. And finally, Calm, Cool and Collected. This is another really nice skill. Whenever we freeze an enemy, our shield instantly begins recharging, and as you can see, there are some other things. If our shield's already full, we regenerate health. If our health is already full, our action cooldowns are immediately reset. Normally, to be honest, our health probably won't be full, or at least not when our shield is also full. That's quite rare during combat on Mayhem 3, but just in general, it's very useful to keep our shields topped up, because every time we freeze an enemy, our shield will begin recharging. So until we subsequently take damage, our shield will be recharging, and that's all for only 1 skill point. Now, in terms of the augment, I really like All-Rounder. Some people might not like it that much, but having a dome, even though it adds to our cooldown time, The dome all around us is just incredibly nice in terms of survivability because you have basically guaranteed safety when you put down your dome. You could be in the middle of combat getting absolutely destroyed by some zealots with rocket launchers, and you just throw down your dome, and from all sides you are now protected unless someone wanders into your dome, and for that we have Deterrence Field. When an enemy touch the barrier, they take shock damage and are staggered. Once again, this isn't really about the shock damage itself, that is negligible, but the staggering effect means that enemies are stunned for basically a couple of seconds. They're not shooting at us, gives us free time to line up hits, and they can't get into your barrier without being stunned for a couple of seconds first, so you'll always have time to react. And I've just found that having those two skills, the survivability and utility that they grant you, is more useful than trying to go for a bit of extra damage from charge relay, or retaliation. And the health regeneration from the skill here, we've already basically got a lot of health regeneration, so it's more useful to stagger our enemies. So that is the build. Probably took quite a long time talking about that, but it is what it is. And now onto the weapons. What I've got here, the setup that I'm using right now, is probably the best all-round for general combat. You can basically go into any area and mob super effectively with the current setup, but there I will go through the other items I have in my inventory and what they're for and the more situational uses for them. So the very strong, very powerful gun that makes this all work is the Maggie, and as you can see I have a really nice one. You don't need this anointed one, but it's especially nice because this is a cryo-focused build. It relies on the freezing of the green tree. Having 50% bonus damage as cryo is awesome, and as you can see it has the 6 pellets, incredibly high damage. It's the best masher in the game, a lot of crit damage. So when we're using the Maggie, you can see that all those pellets basically, well, I'm not far away enough to demonstrate the fact that it is actually 6 pellets firing, but each of those 6 will have that 12% chance to freeze or to slow, and that will stack and freeze, and we can basically spam this thing constantly. Just a very strong weapon all around, and you'll see that for yourself soon. Then I have the Nighthawk in. This gun is incredibly strong both in its cryo and fire forms, and even in the fire form because of our crit effect to slow enemies. Even in the fire form, I should say, it's incredibly powerful, both with freezing and just damage in general. This deals an unbelievably high amount of damage, and I have, once again, I've been grinding quite a bit, so I have an incredibly good one. It's not listed on the card, but the 436 damage there is actually 436 times 3. Once again, this is a high projectile count gun. I'll try and show here just by firing semi-auto. You can't really perhaps tell unless I try and go into photo mode, but it is firing 3 pellets basically. I'm trying to capture it with the with photo mode, but oh, didn't mean to do that. But believe me, it does fire 3 pellets. This is an incredibly nice one. The 4-shot burst one is the ideal one. That's the variant that I have, and as you'll see, basically I can't really just say more than the fact that it just deals really high damage. Redundant Brainstormer, another really high pellet count weapon times 14, and this is going to help you freeze people with the skill synergies, as I've been saying, but also it's a really nice shock shotgun. As you can see, I have a perfect anointment for it as well, so my guns are really the very best of the best that you could be looking for with this build, but you know, any normal Brainstormer, even the times 7 version with no anointment, will do with this build. My build is just, my gear, I should say, is just very, very optimal, very perfect, but a lot of you guys might not have had the time to farm for this gear and grind out for it, but a very strong weapon. And the reason I have this in my slot is because there will be some enemies with big shields, and if you have bad mayhem rolls for your Maggie and your cryo guns will be resisted by the shields, you can use this. It's a very nice weapon, has an unlisted effect that similar to the Vibrapulse in the pre-sequel, that it kind of connects enemies in a chain of lightning and will just drain shields in big groups, and as I said, will still synergize well with the critical hit effects. So a very nice shotgun all round and fits in well with this build. In the 4th slot I have the Laser Exploder, just to keep an AR in for some variation. You can also use the Lucian's Call, there's basically no difference. I just say that the Laser Exploder does a lot more damage, even this version, which I actually don't have anointed, than the Lucian's Call, which is quite a nice one. But the Laser Exploder, even after the nerf, just an incredibly high damage, especially the double penetrating one, Cryo AR. So for that reason it also fits in perfectly with our build. And my shield here, I've got a really nice, the big short stopgap. As you can see, it gives me some nice cooldown rate bonus, just helping me keep topped off even more. But as you can see on my stopgap, I have a really nice one. You guys don't need one this nice, as I've been saying, but the special effect with the stopgap that makes it a really strong, really nice shield is that on shield break you become immune to all damage for 5 seconds, so you're basically invincible for 5 seconds after your shield breaks. But as you can see with mine, I've got the special minus 25% recharge delay one, the big short one, so I get special recharge delay, and that takes my recharge delay down to 4.7. So for those of you maths geniuses, 4.7 is less than 5, meaning that since I'm invincible for 5 seconds, my shield will already have started recharging while I'm still invincible, so I get some free shield recharge, more or less, literally every time my shield breaks. It will start regenerating again, which is very nice, especially when combined with the skills that I've already demonstrated, such as Cool, Calm, and Collected. So yeah, these are very nice skills. For my grenade, I've just got a perfect hex here, perfect cryo hex. Of course I'm Zane, so we never actually use grenades, but basically just have a perfect cryo hex just in case. Still an incredibly strong grenade, and we're not really concerned about the damage, more the stats effects of applying cryo. So that's why I have that there, even though we're never really going to be using it, but there it is regardless. And my class mod, or not my class mod, my relic, I should say, my artifact, as it's called in this game, is very nice. You want Icebreaker is the main thing. Yours doesn't have to be an auto idol. I like the auto idol because the plus 18% health after getting a kill just helps you survive really effectively. But the Icebreaker part of the relic is the key thing here. Against frozen enemies you get 35% bonus damage and 50% cryo efficiency, and also I have incredibly nice rolls on the bonuses down here. 40% mag size is awesome. Cooldown rate is also basically a perfect synergy with my build, as is plus 27% cryo efficiency. So in my humble opinion, this is literally the perfect possible artifact that you can have for this build. But more generally, if you don't have time to farm for these things, then just any icebreaker will make the build work effectively. Likewise with my class mod, I also have more or less, I must say, a perfect class mod here. The only thing that will make it better is if I can get plus 5 on Good Misfortune, if that's even possible. But we're using the executor. At the end of the day, it can be any executor. Mine, as you can see, is a serendipitous cheap shot executor. But the more misfortune, the better. The thing that makes mine so good is again, the rolls down here. I just got so lucky. 25% weapon damage, 45% Jacob's crit damage, and 31% crit damage. It's 31% pistol damage, sorry. And with the Maggie, which is basically the most powerful gun in this build anyway, that is a lot of damage, and you can frequently one-shot mobs even on Mayhem 3, which is very nice. And as you can see, the class mod comes with a kill skill. You get more accuracy handling, crit damage, status effect damage, and status effect chance. So it doesn't take much intelligence to see how this all synergizes incredibly well with my building gear. So this is the primary setup, and I'll just show some alternative weapons that we have in here, just to switch out based on personal preference really. Lucian's Call, this is basically if you want to regen assault rifle ammo, or if you're in a really long extended fight and you don't want to waste your AR ammo. It doesn't quite do as much damage as the laser exploder, but once you start critting it will be a lot more effective at freezing, and also you won't be running out of ammo because of its special effect. The Crossroad, a very strong SMG, and the reason I include a radioactive one in here, I do have a cryo one further down as well. But the radioactive one, this is really helpful for killing anointeds because that's the main weakness of this build. If the Maggie's not doing work, then you need an element other than cryo to kill anointeds because they are immune to it. A nice anointed chaos here, just another really solid cryo AR. I'd say pretty much equal with the laser exploder, just depends on your style of play really, which one is better for you. I've got the Wester gun here, a binary one. This is actually a really underrated gun, I'd say. It's a Malorn SMG, similar to the Devoted. It has no charge time, and my one's cryo. The corrosive part doesn't really matter, but with cryo and this build, it is actually a really strong SMG, especially with a good anointment. I would say a very underrated gun there. I've got a cryo butcher. This gun's incredibly strong. Yeah, this was my basically go-to when I didn't have all this stuff, and it hasn't really stood the test of time, but it's still an incredibly strong cryo shotgun. If you've got favorable modifiers for shotguns, for example, or you just want to save a bit of shotgun ammo because the Butcher, with its special effect that's unlisted, where some pellets add ammo to your magazine, can be more ammo efficient than the Brainstormer. So that's why I have the Butcher, just and again a very strong all-round cryo gun. I've got Shock and Fire Cutsmans here. These are for killing big enemies. Shock one is especially nice for Captain Haunt slash Traunt. The Fire one is very nice for the end bosses at the end of the, what are they called, the Iridium Proving Grounds, and also a nice gun for dealing with Anointeds. The Cutsman, again, just a very strong SMG. Mine is slightly different here with different Anointed effects, but any Cutsman can do. Even a corrosive Cutsman with this build will still do work because the Cutsman is such a strong gun. I've got an Alchemist here. I sometimes use this for doing Grave Ward if I don't kill him in one phase. Alchemist is just a very strong Torg Assault Rifle. It's got a quite cool effect where they're sticky, the projectiles are all sticky, but once you shoot them, it's actually a very high damage assault rifle when the stickies detonate. So really nice there. Cryo Crossroad, this is basically interchangeable with the Nighthawkin, although the Crossroad did get nerfed recently, which is why the Nighthawkin has taken that spot. But the Crossroad, the Cutsman, and the Nighthawkin are basically the three strongest SMGs in the game, with the Westergun being there because it's underrated and fun. But the Cryo Crossroad, this one is just slowed down because it doesn't happen to have an anointment, but you could basically use that instead of the Nighthawkin at any time, really. Fire Lauda, this is just for killing Grave Ward. If you do so wish, you can kill Grave Ward with this build without respecking, although the most effective one I highlighted in my last video. The Bone Shredder, this is a very underrated pistol. If you don't have good non-elemental damage rolls with your Mayhem, you can easily switch out the Maggie for the Bone Shredder. It will consume a ridiculous amount of ammo, and this is probably going to be quite loud when I fire it here, but a lot of cryo effectiveness because it's got 4 pellets, a very fast fire rate, and just a very good weapon with the build for freezing people. As you can see, it just absolutely shreds through ammo, but you're going to be firing this at someone's head and dealing a lot of damage, basically. So there it is, just demonstrating its very high fire rate there. Again, somewhat of an underrated pistol, so I did pick one up for myself in cryo. I do just have a ×18 Torque Bang Stick because they are very powerful shotguns, even more so if I was with Flak or someone, but it's always nice just to have a bit of fun with it on Zane. It can work really well. For some reason I always like to use it to kill Aurelia because I feel like she's very easy to hit crits on, but that's just me, just a very powerful shotgun there. And the Sleeping Giant, another very strong SMG. The SMGs in this game really are superb. Sleeping Giant is very fun to use because of the weapon bonuses that you can get with it. You can deal a lot of damage, so a non-elemental one is just a high DPS gun in general, if you do so wish. Backup shields, I have Transformer. This one's unfortunately Digiclone, it's not for Sentinel or Barrier, but the main point of the Transformer, as you can see, is for its absorbing properties and you are immune to shock damage. So this is very useful, for example, when fighting Kilovolt, just one of the all-round strongest shields in the game because of its survivability. And lastly, in terms of shields, the Frozen Heart. This basically is just because you get very nice lifesteal with your Nova. It fires a Nova when the shield's depleted, and all enemies that get hit are frozen. So it does synergize quite well if you want to be even more effective at freezing enemies. Normally I would say the stopgap helps you survive for a bit longer, so that's why I normally wear the stopgap, but it is quite fun and satisfying to just destroy enemies with a Nova shield, so that's why that's there. The gun is just here because you can't get rid of it. I already have my one from normal mode on my wall, so there it is. Here's an elemental projector in case you want to respec quickly and do the Grave Ward kill. This is a useful relic to do that with, and mine also has luck on it, but basically just an elemental projector just there for bossing if you really need that extra bit of damage. That's also why the sellout is there. That will have been covered in my previous video, so I won't talk too long about that. And then just a Snowdrift loaded dice. This is for farming runs such as Chukabararach. I'm very bad at saying its name, but just for farming runs where you're not farming a big boss, you're just farming a unique enemy. For example, let's say you're farming One Punch Man, or you're farming for the Westergun, so you're farming Private Beans. The Snowdrift part means that you can just get to the boss very quickly from where you spawn in, and the loaded dice part helps with your luck. So if you don't need a lot of damage to kill a boss that you're farming, then switch to this relic. That's the build. That's the gear. That's pretty much everything in that regard. So now I think I'll go over to Heck, because it is Bloody Harvest, so I'll just run over to Heck quickly and just do a little demonstration of the build in combat on Mayhem 3, or in fact I can't be bothered to go to Heck, so I'll just go to Athenas and do some mobbing in Athenas quickly, and then that will be the end of the video. So yeah, just going to travel over here quick. My SSD is clearly lacking because it's taking a while to load, but yeah, I won't show too much gameplay. I'll just show a little bit, because basically if you try this build out for yourself, you will get the stop talking now and just basically let the gameplay speak for itself. You'll see how strong this build is. I'll just show off the Mayhem modifiers quickly. So we have plus elemental damage, so we're not going to be using the Maggie, we're going to use our Cryo, and yeah, enjoy the gameplay.
Songs about that one.